Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. What Katrina once did, COVID-19 might do also, and that is to force the Saints to play at LSU's Tiger Stadium rather than in the Dome, depending on how the ball bounces. City Hall lessens some restrictions, though those who want to toast the announcement may still have to do it outside. We'll be looking at these stories, plus the plight of local musicians during the pandemic and the status of the reworked Clearview shopping area. A year ago this week, the Hard Rock construction project collapsed. We'll look back at where the disaster has taken us so far. And joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, LeBron Joseph, news anchor, WGNO-TV, Channel 26, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Dave Cohen, news director, WWL Radio. I'm going to go over to Errol first, and Orleans Parish is now 3.2.
Yeah, every time we have these phase changes and these loosenings ups, one of the first questions is, and mine too, I got to admit, how about the bar rooms? Okay, how do they do? People aren't asking how about the accountants or the doctor's offices, but the bar rooms, people. But I think that that's a real sign of a real measurement, and certainly in the tourist economy, it's an important question. And so to answer that question, the bar rooms that they can serve drinks, but you got to take them outside to drink them. You still can't hang around the bar and talk to the bartender. And so I think you can see bars that can do it to have an increase in outside seating, which we're already seeing with the restaurants. So that's going to be major. The other thing is that the question of entertainment and bar rooms are a major source or a major place for entertainment. And so under certain conditions, you can have entertainment. But the curious thing is you can't have any wind. You can't have any type of horn that causes air to come out, or people can't be singing, or you can't do karaoke. So I guess this favors the piano player and the guitar player. Now, New Orleans has always been a great piano-playing town, and so that's one of our strengths with the pianos. And so I think you can see that. But I think people have been craving live music. There's a whole bunch of regulations, but something else is on capacity for outdoor events. And depending on circumstances, it's roughly around 250. You know what this brings to mind? If you remember back when all this started, that the Jazz Fest, which was originally scheduled for April, was postponed until October. And then it was fairly early that the Cantrell administration said, no, we have to do it in October, and people were upset about that. But certainly if we look at it today, 250 people wouldn't even get you to see the Neville brothers sometimes. And so with these kind of guidelines, unless they made some kind of an exception, the Jazz Fest wouldn't have happened at all as we stand now. But I think that those outside figures are a real indication of where we are in the future. And the capacity is going to have to increase by a lot in a hurry, for things that are coming up that people are going to want to do in terms of the holidays, in terms of the next Jazz Fest, in terms of Carnival. So that's an important figure that people are going to be looking at. The other thing, the other side issue to this is that, one, there is the COVID issue, but the other, there's a financial issue. And the mayor keeps on pointing that we're going to just need help financially to provide the public safety to it. And so it's a two-pronged issue at this point.
And she cites the fact that the city has been doing well in terms of its infection rate. Like, it's low, 1%, I believe. And this is from a spot that was really a hot spot of the country, those earlier months. So perhaps maybe there could be even more lessening of restrictions, do you think, by the end of the month?
And they're very proud of the progress that they've made, and that New Orleans, was once the worst case, and now it's one of the better examples, and so they're very proud. And I know that certainly the community sentiment, and there's a lot of business interest in terms of loosening. And so I think anyone in political office is getting the measure that people want things to open up again, if for no other reason than financial. And so we're just hoping that that's going to happen.
Okay, Dave, thanks a lot, Ian. Dave, over to you. And certainly one of the issues is crowds in sports stadiums. And so the Saints may be playing at LSU?
Yeah, so far the mayor of New Orleans has refused to budge at all on letting fans in the stands at Saints games in the Superdome. She did allow 750 friends and family members of the players and coaches to test one game, but that's as far as they've gotten so far. And that's a problem for the Saints. And so they started exploring this week, talking with officials in Baton Rouge and at LSU about if LSU Tigers can play football games in Tiger Stadium, shouldn't the Saints be able to as well? And right now, it looks like everybody is on board with this plan. The Saints brass is on board. The Saints coaching staff is on board. The mayor of Baton Rouge and the mayor of New Orleans have made statements in support of playing Saints games in Tiger Stadium with about 25,000 fans, since no fans can come to the Superdome right now.
Well, 25,000 is certainly more than 750, as you noted, that were allowed.
But Dave, the argument when people say, "Why can you play football in Tiger Stadium and not in the Superdome?" That the argument that's been given, I don't know if it's a valid argument, but is that the difference is the Superdome has a roof and Tiger Stadium doesn't. Do we know of any? And that roof is pretty high up there. I mean, it's pretty up there, and you got to have a lot of people doing a lot of serious breathing to be affected by all that. But do we know how valid the roof is as an argument?
We really still don't know. We know that in smaller settings, indoor air versus outdoor air does make a difference in the transmission rate of COVID-19. There's no doubt about that. But there's no studies, since this is a novel coronavirus, it is new. They still don't know whether or not in a massive stadium in the Superdome, if the air that is recirculated is able to transmit the virus at a level at which it could be an issue in the dome versus in an outdoor stadium. Now, the NFL has had teams playing in stadiums with retractable roofs, with roofs closed. Dallas and Atlanta would be perfect examples of that. But the mayor of New Orleans, she's just not interested in even having this discussion. She doesn't want to budge at all.
So the roofs were closed on in those stadiums, because the mayor had made that argument.
That's my understanding.
NFL is not even allowing games to be played in enclosed structures.
Yeah, there have been questions about how much the roof was open, if it was open before and after in Indianapolis, in Atlanta, in Dallas. But I think that's really the issue for the mayor. At least what she's going on is that it's a fixed roof stadium. It can't be opened.
Well, the commissioner,
so she's not interested in the Saints playing games there.
Yeah, the commissioner sent a letter to the mayor 2 weeks ago requesting that the dome be used, that they allow the dome. And so the commissioner certainly knows that the dome has a dome on it when he asked about that. And so, I don't think the NFL has any resistance to the issue. So I don't know.
I think Dawn's trying to get in here.
Okay,
Dawn?
I know it's local fodder too, but a lot of people are saying, why not two-lane stadium then? Why not leave the tax dollars and the people in the city of New Orleans instead of sending them off happily to Baton Rouge?
Because the city of New Orleans is only allowing a few hundred fans in two-lane stadium as well. Even though it's outdoors, they're not going to allow 20 or 25,000 fans in two-lane stadium. And so really it looks like everybody's on board with this plan to move home games for the Saints in November to Tiger Stadium. The mayors of Baton Rouge, New Orleans spoke. They agreed this was the best plan for everybody involved. So I'd be very surprised if this doesn't happen. Some were speculating it was just the Saints trying to put political on Mayor LaToya Cantrell, but it doesn't appear that if that was the case, it worked, because she's on board saying, yeah.
But during Katrina, during that season, right after Katrina, that the Saints did play some games in Tiger Stadium. And as I recall, LeBron, maybe you remember this, that the games didn't do all that well in terms of attendance. Now something was different. With Katrina, the population was dispersed, and so maybe that's a difference. But for some reason, it just didn't work out well for people to be traveling. And I don't know if people in Baton Rouge were that interested, but it wasn't the success people thought it would be.
Yeah, and that was before we went.
I think at the time people were more worried about things other than sports, and they were largely evacuated all over the country. Yeah. The Saints believe they can sell 25,000 tickets to a game in Tiger Stadium.
What'd you say, Dawn? I couldn't hear that.
And it was also before the Drew Brees era in the Saints. So a lot has changed.
Before the championship Saints, yeah, absolutely. All right, so it would be November, Dave? If this happens at LSU, it wouldn't be until November?
It's looking like the earliest they could get everything together would be indeed before the game started in November.
Okay, doke. All right, Dave, thanks a lot. Okay, LeBron, over to you. So we're talking about, sports fans not being able to be participants there, when the game is happening. that hurts a sports fan, but people who have really been hurt by this whole thing too. I mean, in their pocketbooks of musicians, and New Orleans music, Louisiana music, it's such a staple. They've not been able to play.
They haven't been able to play, and for 99.9% of our musicians, unless you've got a catalog like in Allen Toussaint or something, if you don't play, then you don't earn and you don't make money. It's been unlike even restaurants and bars who can operate at a smaller capacity or whatever. We have not been able to put our musicians to work. And so it's been a tough time. Now, that being said, other parts of the state, you certainly can perform. That's been the deal since, say, mid-June or whatever. Errol mentioned earlier in 3.2 that the mayor just unveiled this week. No brass bands essentially inside, no blowing any horns and no singing or anything like that. But, the bright side is, for now, is in the fairly recent past, I'd say the last 2 or 3 weeks to a month, I've seen more activity, heard from more bands. Hey, our first gig, we're doing this. Hey, we're doing that. As it relates to the brass band scene, quite frankly, the majority of these guys' income is not necessarily in a venue. They play a lot of outdoor stuff. They do a lot of funerals. They do a lot of weddings, the outdoor second lines. All of that's outside. So while it is tough, that these guys can't play a Tipitina's or a House of Blues or whatever, I'd go so far as to say as half, if not more, of their income comes from outdoors anyway. I think the one group of folks that we have to give kudos to is some of the local foundations that are centered around our culture. While they haven't, made anybody millionaires, certainly, they have had a continuous effort to try to put money in the hands of musicians and culture bearers. One example is this weekend, the Jazz and Heritage Foundation folks are doing their 15th annual Blues and Barbecue Fest, which would normally happen in Lafayette Square every year. Well, this year it's dedicated to raising money to the Musicians Fund, and they have continued from the beginning of the pandemic to now offer these payments to musicians when they hear that someone's in trouble. When you apply for the grant, basically, but if in fact they need to step out a little bit farther, someone's getting ready to get thrown out of their house or they can't pay their light bill or something like that. And this is for musicians as well as masking Mardi Gras Indians as well. So we had good news there with some of our foundations, and even some of the larger foundations like the Grammy Foundation and all have reached down to New Orleans to sort of help some folks out. But certainly it's not enough. And these are a proud group of folks that want to be able to make a living and earn and do what they need to do to take care of their families.
So some of these groups have been performing virtually.
Yes.
They've been doing virtual concerts?
Many of them have been doing virtual concerts. In fact, the Blues and Barbecue Fest this weekend is virtual. And some have done well virtually, and some have engaged virtually. DeVell Crawford performs virtually all the time, but DeVell is also one of those brilliant piano players that Harold mentioned earlier who has done well for himself. So DeVell is not a person that's necessarily strapped and needing the cash to perform virtually. He plays because he has to play. This is what he does. There are others like Big Frida, who has gotten into some different things and has the cooking thing happening in City Park on Thursday, and she performs some stuff virtually. So there are virtual performances happening. PJ Morton, I know, is doing some stuff. Galactic has done some things virtually. Tank and the Bangers, a host of them. And this has been the only way that they've been able to perform.
Well, we certainly are looking forward to the day when those all of our wonderful musicians can be performing in those clubs and don't have to stop playing or shut the doors at 9 or 10 o'clock because everybody's having that's unheard of in New Orleans, certainly. But glad that it's sort of moving along, and we'll be on the lookout for virtual performances too.
Yep, we want to be in that number.
All righty, LeBron, thanks a lot. Let's move over to Don right now, and some changes at Clearview Shopping Mall.
We've talked about this a little bit already, but it's the transformation of Clearview Shopping Center, which is now 50 years old, into Clearview City Center to hopefully help it live out its next 50 years. This is a $100 million mixed-use redevelopment of the shopping center, and construction has started on the very first portion of that, and that's where the old Sears Auto Center was. It's now becoming a Regions Bank, which is, it's not just a bank branch. It's supposed to be a really cool modern bank branch where you walk in and are greeted by a live person, but then you have almost a virtual kiosk where you can talk to bankers, talk to real life bankers every day of the week, including Sundays and holidays. That started construction last month and should be finished by next spring and be up and going. I'm also told that there will be a major announcement in the next couple of weeks to month about a major medical tenant for this mixed-use facility. Now let's talk for a second about COVID and what COVID has done. When we talk about a mixed-use development, they mean retail. They mean a place where you can live, work, and play. So there will be apartments, there's the retail that exists, plus new retail, plus office, plus fun stuff to do in green space. COVID has kind of changed a little bit of the timing and the phasing. So a hotel portion of that project, as well as office space portion of the project, is probably going to be now the last thing that gets finished instead of maybe closer to the front end. So they're concentrating right now on the multifamily space where construction should start. That'll be the next phase. And that's going to be 260 Class A type apartments where people can live in this space, where there's also a large green space for area for play and activities and outdoor concerts when those types of things are allowed again. Construction of the interior of the mall should happen between March of next year and March of the following year. They're calling that the big lift, where they literally lift off the roof of the structure and make it a more open air feel. We don't have anything in the metro area right now like this. I'm told that the closest thing to the Clearview City Center concept is Perkins Row in Baton Rouge, where you can walk in and out and be outside more than you're inside. The major tenants in the mall are staying. Target will ultimately have apartments on top of it. The AMC Theater isn't going to have to close during the whole thing. Bed Bath & Beyond is there. But some of the other smaller tenants will probably move into new facilities, move back. Try to keep them open the whole time, but there will be a lot of shuffling around as that goes. But it is underway. The timeline for the whole thing is about 3 years from now until it's all the way complete, but expect it to happen in phases. So you'll see those apartments get started, but you won't necessarily see offices or a hotel get started yet, and you'll see some businesses changing and not others, and it's a different, exciting time for that corner of Clearview and Veterans right off the I-10.
It's definitely going to be a different use and a different look. Is it moving? Is the footprint going to move a bit into that parking area? Because there's some pretty broad parking spaces around there.
It'll be more spread out, so it won't be the traditional big parking spaces and then set back mall and then not enough trees and green. It's kind of going to be all mixed up, so that not mixed up in the confusing way, but mixed so that it's a more aesthetically pleasing site.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to see what it develops over these next 3 years. It sounds pretty good from what you're describing.
Lots of announcements coming. I'm told it's all on track. In spite of some change up of the plan, it's all happening on track the way it was originally intended before COVID.
All righty. Thanks a lot, Don. Back over to you, LeBron. And today marks early voting that began in the state.
Yeah, and folks are paying attention and extremely engaged this morning. Several hundred cars and thousands of people in line out in New Orleans East at that voter warehouse. It's actually the what do you call it, election machine warehouse for Orleans Parish. The pictures I've seen online from across the state have been incredible, from Shreveport all the way down. In Lakeview earlier, my live shots for GNO were over at the polling place in Lake Vista. Today, the people that I spoke with that were leaving and wanted to know, hey, how long have you been here? Been here since 8 o'clock. The wait was 2 hours and 45 minutes. And while, you'd think, wow, that should move a little bit faster, I think it's a number of different things. One, we've only got 5 places in the city of New Orleans where you can actually early vote, and 4 or 5 in Jefferson as well, in the East Bank, West Bank as well. But high interest, extremely high interest in the election across the country. It is what it is. Folks are engaged on both sides of the aisle and voting early. And I also think that there's probably a distrust by some saying, hey, you know what? So much doubt was sown with the whole mail-in voter thing, even though that's available, and even though that the COVID absentee thing is available here in Louisiana. People, if you're able to and you can do it safely and you feel that it's as safe as you possibly can be with a mask and social distancing, and I saw all of that earlier as well, and that's essentially what people are doing, and they're taking advantage of it.
As you said, real engagement and real interest, and mail-in. The request for mail-in ballots in the state broke a record too, like over 200,000. So I guess we should really heed the advice. It was Michelle Obama advised everybody: bring a chair, bring your lunch, bring your breakfast for the next day if you have to. Just be prepared.
That's exactly what's going on out there.
All right. Well, just the start of it, and we should say early voting continues to October 27th. Is that correct?
With the exception of the next 2 Sundays. It's Monday through Saturday. And closed on Sunday, but so the next 2 Sundays it'll be closed, but 10 days you got to get out it.
And different locations, so check the different locations in your voting area.
Yep.
All righty, LeBron, thanks a lot. Let's go back over to you, Dave. And as Errol wrote in our lead-in, we have now marked the 1-year anniversary of the collapse of the Hard Rock Hotel construction site. In that year, what have we gone through, and where are we now, and where is it going?
Well, we had hoped that it would all be demolished and the building would be completely gone by now, but that has been because of all the tropical activity, because it took until August to get all the bodies out, because of a number of other factors. That just hasn't happened. So now we're looking at sometime, probably in early 2021, before the entire building is brought down and leveled to a point where then we can start talking about what's going to happen with that site. We have seen over the last few weeks more and more big pieces come crashing down with huge clouds of dust and large booms, and they're making big progress, but it's just not enough. They could not get it done by the 1-year anniversary. What we did see before the 1-year anniversary was more lawsuits filed. We've seen the owner of the property now file a series of lawsuits ahead of that 1-year anniversary, and the blame game and the finger pointing continues and really ramped up a little bit as we got closer to the anniversary.
They're suing the owners. They're suing contractors?
They're suing everybody, yeah, but primarily the architects and the contractors, who they're saying they were to blame, saying they're not the owner's not to blame because the owner is also being sued. Everybody's suing everybody, essentially, is how it goes. And we expect at some point all sit in a room and have to some decisions made, how much money is available from insurance, who should get how much of it, and they'll try to divvy it up without having to have a trial, try to settle on who gets how much, but it's not clear if they'll be able to do that. In the meantime, the effort continues to bring the building and the discussion about what to do. On the 1-year anniversary, we did see the families of the 3 men killed when the building initially collapsed a year ago unveil new banners across the street honoring their loved ones, so they will not be forgotten as this process continues to play out.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that a factor in delaying the demolition was sensitivity about the 2 bodies that was still there? That a lot of thought had to go into it, and what was the right way of doing it. And I think it speaks well as the community that we were that sensitive to it, but it really became a factor in delaying the progress too.
Yeah, there's no doubt that because A, it took so long to find the remains and remove them, and B, the discussion about how to best. Remember, they were going to just explode the entire thing, a massive implosion, bring it all crashing down, and then dig the remains out. Well, ultimately, it was decided that that was not the best way, either because of the optics of it, because of the impact on the families, or because of the concern about all the infrastructure underneath streets in this area. They decided to go with a traditional demolition. So that meant having to break down piece after piece after piece so you could find those remains, then remove them. And so it all just extended the time that this is taking.
So, Dave, for those of us who have not been there to the site or even maybe seen much video, could you describe, sort of walk us through what's been taken down, what remains? Are those cranes? Are the remnants of the cranes? Are those gone or what?
You still see pieces of the yellow cranes that were there during the construction, but most of that is gone. Remember, those were demolished initially into several pieces that came tumbling down. A couple of those pieces remain. What the big difference is, if you haven't seen it, is all of those pancaked floors of concrete that were all laying on each other, dangling on an odd angle, hanging off the sides. Those have been, by and large, brought down. And what's left is mostly the metal structure, at least above the 4th floor. It's just large pieces of metal now that they have to go through and try to break apart or cut apart and get rid of those as they go floor by floor from top to bottom, getting rid of all the concrete and the other building materials other than just that steel structure.
And so it'll be cleared, that whole footprint will be cleared of any part of that structure, down to the dirt, as they say?
The whole thing, yeah, it's going to be gone, down to the dirt. They don't want any remnants, every piece of it. Believe it'll either be safe or make sense to try and build on any part of it that's left. So they're going to remove all evidence of that building ever having been there, along with 3 buildings nearby that have already been demolished as well. There's going to be a very large empty space there when this process is done early next year.
Ironically, it's the site of the historic 60 sit-ins of the Woolworths.
That's right.
And it'd be great to at least have a marker there saying what that is, you know.
Indeed. So but we won't say that until the beginning of next year. We'll get there until that's the soonest.
Yes.
Okay, Dave. All righty. Thanks a lot. Time for a round table right now and other stories that have happened in this past week. We'll start with Errol.
Well, we saw the passing of Phyllis Landreau this week, and Phyllis Landreau first entered public life in 1969 when her brother-in-law, Moon Landreau, ran for mayor. And she was the real boiler-room person in the campaign, a really tough politician who worked behind the scenes. But beyond the politics, she was always very interested in education. She became a school board member. Unfortunately, her 4-year term was during the same time of Katrina, and she was served as school board president during that time, which was one of the roughest times in the history of being on a very rough board. But I think one thing she was remembered for was her activism in early childhood education. Right. She was very, very active in that, and that was playing just a major, major role in the community.
And the health of children, too, and how it impacts, that certainly impacts our education, too. She was a dynamo, and so certainly our condolences to the Landreau family for the loss of Phyllis Landreau. Quite a lady. All right, Don, over to you.
Amy Coney Barrett, how can we not talk about her this week? But instead of talking about any of the politics surrounding her, I'll talk about the national storm that blew up over what her accent sounds like and what people are learning about where New Orleanians actually come from. There's been Twitter arguments on how she sounds like she's from New York and how could a New Orleanian possibly sound like that. So national education underway about the fact that we don't all speak with a Southern drawl.
That's right. Okay. All right, Don. Thanks a lot. LeBron, over to you.
You know, it's pretty interesting. The mayor goes up to Baton Rouge almost hat in hand, you know, to say, hey, guys, we need help. And got a couple of stern looks and a few fingers wagged at her and everything. Stephen Perry just last night and yesterday along the same lines of saying, hey, state government, we need a hand here. Our industry is dying, and this is what feeds you. And trying to get these folks to see what's happening. It'll be interesting to see whether anything happens. No one thought the mayor could get, you know, the fair share money from the state or anything like that. So maybe there's some hope that she could make something happen, but it doesn't look good right now.
All right, LeBron. Dave, real quick to you, because we're just about out of time.
LSU was supposed to play in Florida tomorrow. They will not because 19 Florida Gator football players have COVID. That game has been postponed till December.
All right. All right, guys, thanks a lot for joining us from your different spots. Thank you all for joining us, too. See you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.